Hi, this is the Peaceful Prepper, and today I want to talk about protective masks. I may as well get the bad news out of the way up front. I'm not actually going to tell you which specific mask you need in your preps, and there doesn't seem to be one perfect mask that covers all situations. PPE, or personal protective equipment, is closely linked to emergency preparedness. It includes much more than masks and respiratory protection, but that's what I'm going to focus on in this video. The rule of 3 is often referred to in prepping conversations. You won't survive 3 hours in extreme temperature, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. But not everyone mentions the 3 which I think is the first priority, 3 minutes without breathable air. Although profound blood loss could be a higher priority in some situations. So recently, with the Ebola crisis, PPE has become more of a focus. There have been some really good videos about infection control in PPE, and I've linked one by the prepper nurse and one by the skinny medic below. But protective masks have applications not just in healthcare. I found it really confusing to understand what type of mask or filter is appropriate in what kind of situations, and then I didn't know how to evaluate all the things being said for and against different masks. If you watch enough videos or read enough blogs, you'll hear N95 masks are useless, N95 masks are all you need, gas masks are a waste of money, all you need is a good military surplus gas mask, etc., etc. So I've done some research to help me make my decisions and want to share that with you to the best of my ability. I don't have any particular training or experience with protective masks. It's always important for you to do your own research from sources you trust when you're looking at products that can protect your health or save your life. I've put links below to some websites so you can see the information that I've been using firsthand. Also, many of you have used a variety of masks at your jobs or in the military. I hope you'll share your knowledge and experience in the comments or even a video response. There doesn't seem to be one single perfect mask. Masks and filters are most effective when they're designed to address specific hazards at specific concentrations for specific amounts of time. Our decision on whether to store a protective mask and what kind to store will vary, but I think in order to make that decision, we need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of different types of masks and find the right mask for the types of hazards we want to be prepared for. As usual, I like to start with thinking about why I might need something and identifying some of the potential hazards. So I put together this list. It's definitely not exhaustive at all. There are lots of other things that could be put on it. And there's probably nothing particularly surprising. Fires, building collapses, volcanoes, chemical and petroleum spills, epidemics, attacks can create dust and debris, smoke, carbon monoxide, infection, etc. I did include home repair, which isn't necessarily emergency related, but it can present some health risks depending on what you're doing, and in emergency it might be required, so it's good to have the supplies you might need. Masks and eye protection may be of particular interest to urban preppers because the proximity of people increases the importance of infection control. The proximity of buildings increases the likelihood of smoke, dust, and potentially toxic debris from fires and building collapses, and urban settings are more likely to be targets for terrorists. But of course, respiratory protection is useful or even life-threatening in a wide range of circumstances and settings. Here's a chart of some general types of protective masks. The first category in terminology to understand is a regular face mask versus a respirator. Face masks give a physical barrier but are very limited. You can make a mask out of bandana, and it can be what you need in some situations, but it will be completely useless in others. Dust masks provide some protection from dust and pollen, but there are gaps between the mask and your face. And surgical masks should meet FDA regulations, which mean it provides a water-resistant barrier. They're designed to protect patients from germs by the wearer of the mask, and protect the wearer from being sprayed or splashed with bodily fluids and water droplets that might be infectious. But again, they have gaps between the mask and your face, so they're not going to protect you from anything airborne. So that's enough about face masks, and that's not what I'm going to really focus on in this video. Respirators, on the other hand, are designed to protect the user from airborne contaminants and need to have a tight seal on the user's face so air is pulled through the filter rather than into the gaps. The fit of a respirator is critical. I probably am going to say that over and over again because it seemed in everything I read that couldn't be overemphasized. So no matter how good the filter, if there are gaps in the fit, you won't get the protection that's intended. Respirators have two general types: air purifying respirators that remove contaminants from the air, and supplied air respirators that provide their own clean air source. Air purifying respirators, you have to have adequate oxygen in the environment. If you're in a low oxygen environment, they're not going to be able to address that at all. Whereas respirators that supply their own air can be used in an oxygen-deprived environment. One type of supplied air respirator that you might hear about is SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus. And that's the type used by firefighters that you see there's a tank on their back. OSHA regulations state that anyone who is required to wear a respirator be checked out by a doctor. It's harder to breathe in a respirator, and that can be a health hazard to anyone with asthma, emphysema, other lung and heart problems, and some pregnant women. Especially with full-face respirators that I'll talk about in a minute, and the supplied air and SCBA, a type of supplied air, you should consider your health, consult a doctor, and practice with them to see if you can physically handle them. When you wear one, your respiration becomes significantly more labored. You literally have to train yourself how to breathe and work in one. This is based on reading that I've done, not on personal experience. So every task you do while wearing one becomes more difficult. The supplied air respirators, particularly the SCBAs, can also be very heavy. They can weigh up to 30 pounds, maybe more. There are also powered air purifying respirators, but it's the unpowered APRs, or air purifying respirators, that I did more research on because for emergency situations, I'd rather not store and rely on battery-powered devices. These are common types of air purifying respirators, APRs. Disposable respirators are like the N95 respirator, which a lot of people are very familiar with. Escape hoods can be disposable or reusable. They might have supplied airs, so they're not necessarily in this category, or they might purify the air. They're sold to consumers as well as industry and range enormously from maybe $20 to hundreds of dollars or more, and I suspect their effectiveness ranges as much as the price. They're designed for short periods to help you get out of a situation like a fire or chemical exposure. Half-mask respirators use cartridge filters and cover half your face, and full-face masks cover your whole face and give eye protection as part of the mask. They might also include some kind of hood, and when we talk about gas masks, this is usually what people are talking about, which until I did this research I didn't really understand, but these particularly are the kinds of respirators that are referred to as gas masks. NIOSH, or NIOSH, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. It's a U.S. organization, part of the CDC, I believe, Center for Disease Control in the United States. They certify several categories of disposable respirators, which you may be familiar with. The number reflects the percentage of particles filtered, so there are 95, 99, and 100% filters. And then the letter is related to oil resistance. So if it's an N95, it means it's 95% of the particles filtered, but it's not resistant to oil. If it's an R, it's somewhat resistant to oil, and if it's a P, it's strongly resistant to oil. There's also an N95 surgical mask, which in addition to NIOSH's certification has been cleared by the FDA as a surgical mask and is fluid resistant. So it provides some of the same benefits that a regular surgical mask would do, but it also is a respirator rather than just a face mask. The NIOSH categories aren't the only ones that you may see. There are different international standards. And the ones I was able to find, I didn't find a lot of information just doing a general Google search, but in Europe, the EU categorization, one of the European standards is called EN149. I don't think it's the only one, but that's one of them. And they classify disposable respirators into 3 classifications, FFP1, FFP2, FFP3, based on the percentage of airborne particles they filter. So they have 80%, 94%, and 99%. And the FFP2 is most similar to the N95 masks that you'll find in this country, and I believe the NIOSH certifications are used in North America generally, but if I'm wrong, apologies to Canada and to Mexico. Disposable respirators do seem to have a shelf life, which seem to range from 3 to 5 years depending on the mask, although I certainly read quite a few opinions questioning whether that was an appropriate shelf life or whether it would last longer. I've put a link below to 3M's explanation of it. 3M is one of the big companies that makes masks that are certified by NIOSH. It's worth looking into just to make sure you're not wasting your money and that they'll be effective when you need them. Like all respirators, a tight seal is critical for a disposable respirator to be effective. There are lots of different shapes and sizes in N95 to P100 respirators. All of these pictured are N95 respirators. I've done, I guess I'd call it a companion video, or I'm in the process of doing it just on disposable respirators. My experience with finding ones that fit me and how I plan to use them in kits. So I'm not going to go into detail about that here. I expect to upload it probably tomorrow, so once it's up, I'll link it below. There are also a lot of videos about proper fit and use for manufacturers, OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Organization, I've forgotten the thing, but is responsible for a lot of the guidelines in the United States, and the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control. The half mask and full face versions of air purifying respirators are what is usually meant when people talk about gas masks. But vapors and gas may not actually be what they purify. The key to knowing what the mask can protect you from is not in the mask, but the type of filter. And the filter manufacturers should provide specific information about what any particular filter is capable of filtering and at what concentrations. I've put a link below to a video on air purifying respirators, this type, by Kydex by Parlux. He has a YouTube channel that I've just discovered, and he works with chemical cleanup, so he has a lot of experience-based information to share, and I found the video very helpful. Generally, filters come in 2 categories: the particle filters and the vapor and gas filters. Particle filtering respirators are sometimes referred to as PFR, provide a physical barrier to dust, mists, fumes, and fibers. This is also what disposable respirators do, but they can't protect against more toxic contaminants like asbestos fibers. The more toxic contaminants, they require a respirator with a replaceable filter that fits very tightly on the face, more so than a disposable respirator could. These type of respirators, however, do not protect against gases or vapors, and as I've said, none of the air purifying respirators will help if you're in an oxygen deficient environment. Gases and vapors from liquids such as solvents are dissolved in the air and can't be trapped with a particulate filter. The gas and vapor respirators filter incoming air through one or more chemical containing cartridges or canisters, and the chemicals absorb or change the contaminant. One popular APR among preppers is the Israeli gas mask. I don't have any experience with it, but some of my readings suggest that if it fits your face well, if you get a good seal, it can be a good economical option if you're looking for this kind of filter, kind of mask, but find out about the filter. Especially if you find one at bargain prices, you may want to replace it with a better quality filter. Manufacturers should provide information about the best way to store the filter and its expiration date. The reusable masks themselves should continue to be useful as long as they're still airtight and the material hasn't started to degrade. Light, heat, humidity, again, are not our friends when it comes to long-term storage. CBRN, which is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear, seems to be the new acronym that's replaced NBC, which was nuclear, biological, and chemical. And I've linked a CBRN fact sheet summary below. There are special regulations and certifications regarding that kind of protection, and if you're thinking of buying that type of filter, it'd be really important to understand them. The effectiveness of all of these is based on the appropriateness of the filtration. Is the filter even designed to protect you against the particular chemical that you're encountering? And of course, the fit of the mask. Unfortunately, for many men, masks won't create a good airtight seal if you have any facial hair. So that's something to think about. And if you're looking at full face masks, make sure you try it on. Obviously, you want the airtight fit, but it's also important to check the visibility, which can be problematic due to either how it fits your face. Even if it's an airtight seal, the visibility may be impacted by the design, and how quickly it fogs up. Escape hoods are designed to protect you for short periods of time, just to let you exit from an environment. And again, different hoods will have different types of filters and only be useful in certain environments. These are pictures of a variety of hoods that are geared towards consumers rather than industry. And I couldn't find anything but manufacturers' information on these. They might be a very useful prep, but I don't like only getting information from the person who's trying to sell it to me. They range from inexpensive, maybe $20, to industrial grade with air supply for hundreds of dollars. Some of them have supplied air, some of them are powered air purifying respirators. And I suspect the quality and whether they're useful at all will range as well. The NIOSH fact sheet on respirators that I linked below has this to say about them, and I'm just going to read it straight out. It's important to read the manufacturer's information if your main concern is to be able to escape from a smoke-filled building. Smoke particles can rapidly clog gas mask filters, and filters with special chemicals are needed to protect against carbon monoxide and other gases that may occur in a fire. Not all gas masks and escape respirators protect against these hazards. Some components, including hoods and face pieces of many of the gas masks and escape respirators, may melt if exposed to fire. So this is definitely a buyer beware, do your research kind of area at this point, it seems to me. These are OSHA's guidelines for respirator use that I believe are mandatory if a respirator is required of workers. And as I've mentioned, respirators make it more difficult to breathe, so OSHA actually requires people be examined by a doctor before they're qualified to use a respirator. And in industrial settings, they match the toxin and the concentration to the filter. the contaminant and the concentration have to be known, and the specific filter has to be approved for that contaminant and concentration level. Obviously, that will be different for people preparing for an emergency. Air purifying respirators don't provide oxygen, so OSHA says that the oxygen concentration has to be at least 19.5%. And they require what they call a fit test, and this is not just the user checking their own fit, and they suggest it's done annually. There's information online about this, and I think even professional services who do it. Again, it doesn't matter what the filter does if you don't have an airtight fit, especially in a highly toxic environment. Here's a list of issues that I think are important for preppers and people interested in emergency preparedness to think about when planning for respiratory protection and the use of masks. I've already talked quite a bit about the fact that matching the mask to the specific contaminant and concentration is generally the best practice, and that's just not going to be possible for most of us. And fit is critical, and so remember that probably means that you're going to need different masks for different members of the family or different members of your prepping group to get an appropriate fit. Again, facial hair interferes with the fit, and many masks don't have child sizes, although there are usually small adult sizes in some version of it, and that may work well for older children. Not only do many respirators not fit small children, but very young children and infants may have problems with the additional difficulty breathing in a respirator that respirators cause, just as there can be health risks for other adults using respirators. In industrial settings, they require an annual fit test. I imagine it's possible to learn how to perform these tests. It may involve buying some equipment, but it is additional time and money. And filters and cartridges also have shelf lives, so you need to make sure that what you buy is still effective when you need it. And we need to balance the pros and cons of the effectiveness with the cost and the weight of a particular respirator. I'm not suggesting that respirators are essential preps. Think about what you see as the risks in your area. Food, water, light, warmth are key concerns in so many situations. Respirators may not be. Having said that, I think the disposable masks and respirators aren't a bad idea in a lot of situations. They're a lot less expensive, and they have uses in everyday life as well as in an emergency. Surgical masks can be helpful if someone in your household has a cold or flu, not just for pandemic conditions. Dust masks and N95 respirators are helpful to protect your lungs in a range of situations. Woodworking, outdoor activities when there's a lot of pollen or air pollution. My parents always kept a box of N95 masks around because we used them when we cleaned out their barn or garage after mice had found a home there for a while. Mouse droppings are not fun to breathe in and can be dangerous. So as always, think about your budget, what you feel is most critical for the health and safety of you and your family. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this has been helpful. Please like, comment, subscribe, especially if you have personal experience or knowledge about respiratory protection and masks. It would be great to hear about it or to watch a video response. Be safe, be happy.